In the beginning, there was the light, the earth, the water, the fire, and the promise of great things. Out of which came the glen, from which flows the Livet. Remote and undisturbed, the Glenlivet is the ideal place to make whiskey, which is why our founder George Smith chose it. He uses the steam and the still, that wondrous device that burns away all but the finest gold of creation. Whiskey.
Whiskey's the water of life.
Unfortunately, all of this was against the law until the day in 1822 when the king shows up, tries the whiskey, and guess what? Loves it. The following year, making whiskey here is now legal, but only with a licence. This is not that licence. Thanks to his ambition and vision, George Smith is the first person in the Glen to apply for the licence. This pioneering move would later lead to the indenture, the legal document that means his creation is the only whiskey that can be called the Glenlivet. He uses the water to malt and mash the whiskey, the wood for the casks to hold it, and the cool darkness of the warehouse to bind it. And he is rewarded with the creation of the signature Speyside whiskey, the nose of flowers, fruits and... what is that? Citrus? It is the very spirit of the Glen itself, distilled into a pleasure at once defining, inspiring, enduring.
It tastes wonderfully.
The kind celebrated by the famous of their day, as in this Dickensian letter by Charles Dickens, and continued to this day by the master distiller still at work beneath the indenture, the one that silenced pretenders and transformed a whiskey into the whiskey.
It is our responsibility as the premium radio station in the province, and the biggest one for that matter, to make sure that we play our crucial role, and our crucial role is to make sure that we package events of serious importance and significance during the week. It cannot be right that the city only has entertainment over the weekend at particular sports. Every sport that is in town, we must make sure that we come up with glowing and glorious ideas to make sure that the residents of the city do not get bored when we are in leadership positions. Just want to single out pen on record for identifying the need for like-minded brands to come together and bring premium listeners and patrons to this venue. And for that matter, because it is often said our black people do not have disposable income. It's not true. We know that for a fact. For these brands to meet with our brand, it becomes a perfect combination, match made somewhere else. So tonight, we're gonna make sure with this first function, we demonstrate that we can package events of serious importance and make sure that we entertain our clients as well as our patrons in a nice and a relaxed environment. Adult and contemporary entertainment is very scarce in the city, so it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we do that exactly. So this is the first step toward the correct direction. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Rio, for that. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Marco. I'm the brand ambassador for the Glenlivet in South Africa. And tonight we're going to be tasting the water of life, which is popularly known as whiskey. Alright, so before we actually get to indulge in the liquid gold in front of you, I'm briefly going to be talking about the origins of whiskey as well as a bit about the history of the Glenlivet, and then we're going to dive straight into the tasting. Is that good with everyone? Alright, so I always like to start off with a question. So who of you can tell me where whiskey originated from? What country pops to mind first? Ireland? Scotland? Alright, so it's believed that the Irish are the ones that made whiskey first, but I always say the Scottish are the ones that perfected it first. So for all you Irish whiskey lovers, it's worth noting down that the Scots are the ones that perfected it. Alright, so Scotch whiskey, also known as Ushkaba, which means water of life in Gaelic, traces its beginnings back to the 1700s in Scotland. Now in Scotland, there's 5 main regions which specialize in whiskey making, which is namely Lowlands, Highlands, Islay, Campbelltown, and Speyside. So each of which have their own distinctive characteristics and style of making whiskies. Like for example, your Islay whiskey is very smoky, very peaty, whereas your Speyside whiskey is generally much more fruity and much more floral. Now the area of Speyside is where our founder and visionary George Smith founded the Glenlivet in the 1800s. Now the name Glenlivet, roughly translated from the language of Gaelic, means valley of the smooth flowing wine. So Glen means valley and Livet means river, i.e. smooth flowing wine. And the Glenlivet area or Glenlivet parish is located on the remote hillsides of Speyside. So Speyside is to Scotch whiskey what cognac is to brandy and what champagne is to sparkling wine. It's really an iconic area within Scotland for whiskey making, right? The Glenlivet distillery was on the remote hillsides of Speyside, which made it the perfect place for illegal whiskey making back in the 1800s. Now, illegal distillation was quite widespread during this time, mainly due to the high levels of tax on the actual whiskey. So everybody and their mother was basically making illegal whiskey. But even in that time, the Glenlivet started gaining its reputation as being amongst the best quality Scotch whiskies. In actual fact, King George V of England actually visited Scotland in 1822 and demanded to taste the Glenlivet whiskey specifically, which is remarkable for 2 reasons. I mean, first of all, it was illegal, and you're having a king coming there demanding to taste illegal whiskey. And second of all, just a testament to show how popular the Glenlivet name was becoming, that even people outside of the UK were actually hearing about the Glenlivet. Alright, so a bit of a side note to that story. So King George V was actually sent to Scotland as punishment. So he was caught fooling around with his mistress, his side chick, and as punishment, they shipped him off to Scotland, which in my opinion is not such a bad punishment. I mean, first of all, you go to Scotland, and then after that, you get to taste Glenlivet whiskey. So in my opinion, that's not a bad punishment at all. Alright, so in 1823, a piece of legislation came into play called the Excise Act. Now, the Excise Act was a piece of legislation that lowered the tax on whiskey. And that's where our founder, George Smith, saw his window of opportunity to make the Glenlivet the first legal whiskey distillery in the Glenlivet parish. Now, as you'd imagine, this caused a lot of trouble and a lot of backlash amongst all our competition. We're still operating outside of the law. So they viewed George Smith as a traitor. So they came up against him, they threatened his family, threatened to burn down his distillery with him in it. I mean, imagine being surrounded by 200 of your neighbors, all threatening your life. I mean, any normal person would just close on shop, hasta la vista, out, right? But not George Smith. He was a guy that had a lot of bravery, a lot of courage, and he fought back against these illicit distillers. And his bravery is actually admired by a nearby landowner who actually gifted him with 2 flintlock pistols to protect himself with. So these flintlock pistols quite closely resemble the type of pistols that you see on a Pirates in the Caribbean type of movie. So just imagine this oak there with 2 guns protecting himself from over 200 illicit distillers. That sheer bravery and courage is really what set the foundation for what the Glenlivet is today. Fast forward a couple decades later, you see the Glenlivet gaining more and more popularity, becoming more synonymous with quality Scotch whiskey. And as with any amazing product ever made, it was actually inevitably copied and mimicked by our competitors who actually used the Glenlivet name in their whiskey. So for those of you that know Macallan whiskey, Macallan used to call themselves Macallan Glenlivet. And then Aberlour, which is our brother whiskey now, they used to call themselves the Aberlour Glenlivet. So imagine everyone was piggybacking on the Glenlivet name just to increase their sales. And this became a growing problem for George Smith and his family. So this is when his son, John Gordon Smith, stepped into the picture and found a solution to this by trademarking the Glenlivet name in 1884, which allowed us to become the one and only The Glenlivet, not just Glenlivet. Mind you, it took us over 8 years to fight in court just to get the naming rights to call ourselves The Glenlivet. So it's quite remarkable to think that with its humble beginnings from the small area of Speyside in Scotland, that the Glenlivet soon became demanded in other countries outside of the UK. In actual fact, it found its way all the way to South Africa, back in the 1900s during the Anglo-Boer War, when John Gordon Smith actually sent a cask of the Glenlivet to his former military battalion who was fighting in the siege of Ladysmith. So even though that whiskey wasn't for us South Africans, it's quite amazing to think that the Glenlivet whiskey found its way all the way to South Africa before it went to your main markets like in Asia and the West. But nevertheless, it wasn't until John Gordon Smith's great nephew, Captain Bill Smith Grant, who truly took the Glenlivet international, and he made the Glenlivet available to the American market, who was extremely thirsty for quality Scotch whisky after their prohibition ended. Now, if you just fast forward to the current day, the Glenlivet's available in over 150 countries in the world, and is ranked as one of the top single malt Scotch whiskies in the world. So once again, quite amazing to think that with its humble beginnings from the small aerospace side, with the sheer dedication and courage by the Smith family to making nothing but quality Scotch whisky, that the Glenlivet became and remain to this day the definitive whiskey, and we always call it the single malt that started it all. Alright, so now we actually get to the best part of our time, ladies and gentlemen. We actually get to indulge in the liquid history in front of us. So let's begin with the first whiskey, which is the furthest to everyone's left. So please pick up the glass furthest to your left. And what I want you guys to do now... Oh, yes, yes. Sorry, yeah, so what I want you guys to do before I actually go on to nose and taste the whiskey, I want you guys to hold up the glass to your eye and look at the color. Right? If you look at the color, it's almost like the lighting's a bit bad here, but if you look at the color, it's almost like a beautiful, vibrant gold color. Right? And that gold color comes from the oak cask, the wood that the whiskey is matured in. So initially, before the liquid goes into the wooden casks, it's a clear water-like color. So it gains all its color from the oak cask during maturation. Right? And in particular, what we're tasting right now is called the Glenlivet Founders Reserve. So what the Glenlivet Founders Reserve is, it's called a non-age statement whiskey. So what non-age statement whiskey means is that there's no age on the box or the bottle, right? The 15, the 18, the 21, the 12, those are all age statements. And what the whiskey industry is trying to do with non-age statements is that they're trying to move away from age statements because everyone associates age with quality. So immediately an 18 is better than a 15, and a 15 is better than a 12. That's not the case. Each whiskey tastes completely different, and that's what we should be focusing on. Less on the age and the price and more on the actual taste of the whiskey, right? So this is what the Founders Reserve represents. And remember back in George Smith's day, they weren't necessarily making age statements back in the 1800s. They were making whiskey to taste a specific way and then releasing it. So this pays homage to our founder, George Smith, hence Founders Reserve. Alright, so now let's go on to nose the whiskey. So let's smell the whiskey, and I want you guys to tell me what aromas come to mind first when you smell the whiskey. And please don't say whiskey. What was that? Like a sherry, okay. Anyone else? Any fruity notes that come to mind? Some people get like that vanilla note that comes to mind. Anything else? So the Founders Reserve is very popular for its like citrus type of notes, right? So it's like got that citrus zest to it. Some people get like that toffee. It depends, right? So you guys actually know why we nose whiskey. So you nose whiskey because your sense of smell is the strongest out of all your 5 senses. As you guys know, as soon as we get flu and your nose is blocked, you can't taste anything. So it just shows you how important your nose is when you're actually tasting whiskey. So I always encourage people to nose more than you taste. That way when you actually eventually go on to taste your whiskey, you get much more out of the flavors. Alright, so let's go on to take a sip of the whiskey. Please don't shoot the whiskey. Let's take a small sip, swirl it around your palate, and let me know what flavors come to mind on the palate. You guys feel it's like that vanilla after finish, bit of that citrus notes that come to mind. Did anyone get anything else? Right, so when it comes to tasting whiskey, right, I'll never forget, I did a tasting for about 40 people last September, and I was encouraging them to tell me what flavors come to mind, right? So everyone was quiet, and I was like, okay, please nose the whiskey, tell me what aromas come to mind, and then eventually one guy at the back of the room stands up. He's like, calamari. I was like, shit. That's the worst thing you can say about my whiskey. But the funny thing is that it's not wrong. Right? So taste and smell is completely subjective. Everyone tastes and smells completely different things. So it's all influenced by what you eat. And I actually forgot to ask him if he actually ate calamari that day. But it's all influenced by what you eat. Whether you're a smoker, you'll taste the whiskey completely differently to the next person. So tonight, don't feel intimidated by my tasting notes. It's merely a guide. Everyone will taste and smell completely different things. Alright? So what I want us to do right now, right, is I want us to add water. So you see this water in front of everyone. So I want you guys to add water at a 50-50 ratio to your whiskey. And what we're going to do right now is we're going to open up our whiskey with the water. actually opening up our whiskey right now, because this whiskey is at 43% ABV, alcohol by volume. So when you add water, you actually open up your whiskey. So you lower the alcohol content down to about 21.5%, so that now we'll be able to nose and taste less of the alcohol and actually more of the actual whiskey flavors, right? Because a lot of the time that alcohol really masks a lot of the flavors of the whiskey. So now I want you guys to actually nose the whiskey, and you'll feel that the flavors become much more pronounced, right? So you'll feel that much more of those fruity flavors come to mind, the vanilla comes much more pronounced. Now to take a small sip. You feel like the flavors of the whiskey have become much more there, right? So a lot of people like, "Ah, Marco, what you doing? Why are you adding water to this whiskey? You're not supposed to do anything to whiskey." Those are alcoholics, because all they want to taste is the alcohol. So you need to add the water into your whiskey to really open up your whiskey. I actually got a question for you guys. How do you guys normally drink your whiskey? Tonic water, soda, neat, ice, cranberry, okay? So when it comes to whiskey, right, I hate putting rules on whiskey, right? So you always have people putting all these rules onto whiskey. But I have a very strong suggestion when it comes to ice. Right? So when you're first tasting a very special single malt like the Glenlivet, I encourage you never to first taste it with ice. The reason being, ice suppresses all the flavors and aromas of your whiskey. It instantly closes up your whiskey, right? A very bad example, I haven't found a better example than this, so please forgive me. Gents, you guys all know this, or for all the ladies, you won't. If you do, I'll be a bit worried about your life. Gents, when we go to the men's public urinal, you always see ice in the urinal, right? And that's to suppress the bad odors. That's exactly what it's doing to your whiskey, but now it's suppressing all the amazing flavors, right? And I want to give you guys that gruesome image so that you realize what you're doing when you actually add the ice, right? But we do live in South Africa. It gets bloody hot here. You can't be drinking warm whiskey all the time. So what I encourage you guys to do, if you're going to add ice, right, never pour your whiskey directly over your ice, because then it's instantly going to chill the liquid. Rather pour your whiskey first and then you add your ice gradually after that, right? So ice is perfect when you're drinking your whiskey. But when you're tasting your whiskey, it's better not to add your ice. Does that make sense? So tasting and drinking, completely different thing. So what we're doing right now is tasting whiskey. It's not a drinking session, or maybe afterwards it will be a drinking session. But literally now, to actually taste your whiskey, you need to taste it at room temperature water. So a lot of people ask me like, "Oh, but can you put your whiskey in the fridge?" It's going to do the same thing. You add your whiskey stones, or you add cold water, it's going to do the same thing to your whiskey. It's going to close up the flavors, right? So you literally need to taste your whiskey at room temperature with room temperature water to actually get the flavors of the actual whiskey. Makes sense? Alright. So what do you guys think about the Founders Reserve? Right? Very smooth, very creamy. It's more of our introduction to our single malt range, right? So a lot of first-time whiskey drinkers really like the Founders Reserve because it's very light, very fruity. It's a perfect whiskey to mix in your whiskey cocktails. Whiskey cocktails are becoming more and more popular in South Africa, right? And I'm not talking about your multicolored, rainbow-colored cocktails. I'm talking about actual whiskey cocktails that are actually even gents drinking. Everyone always associates cocktails with ladies, but whiskey cocktails are becoming more and more popular with guys also, and ladies, right? So it really pays tribute to the flavors and really complements the flavors of a whiskey cocktail. So something to try out next time you guys are there. You know, everyone looks at whiskey as a boring spirit category, right? But I always encourage people to change it up, right? So a lot of you guys were saying that somebody mix it with cranberry, mix it with tonic. That's a good thing, right? So people playing around with their whiskey, which is good, right? So I also always thought it was like sacrilege to add anything to your whiskey, right? So during my training, I trained for 5 weeks in Scotland, and we trained with a gentleman named Colin Scott, who's the master blender for Chivas Regal and Royal Salute whiskey, right? So after our training, we go to the bar, we go for team building, and he orders a Chivas Regal 18-year-old, and he orders it with soda water. So all of us young guys are there looking at him like, what are you doing? Isn't that supposed to be sacrilege? Like, what are you doing to whiskey? He looks at us and is like, my boy, my name is on that bottle, I can drink it however I damn well please. I was like, yo, okay. Then I actually kept quiet, but then it got me thinking, I was like, you know what, he's right. You should drink whiskey the way you like it. It's your money, you bought it, you should enjoy it the way you want to. Whether you want to add ginger ale, you want to add lemonade, you want to add Oros to an 18-year-old, by all means, do it. It's your money. I might start crying if you add Oros to an 18-year-old, but hey, it's your money, right? But, you know, everyone looks at whiskey like that boring, stereotypical guy that's sitting by the fireplace with a cigar and he's got his whiskey. But it's much more than that. A lot of people are getting more innovative with whiskey. I mean, I was experimenting with a Founders Reserve during the summer this year. And obviously, you know, if you pour yourself a double, right, within a couple sips, like 4 or 5 sips, it's done, right? But in order to make a longer drink on a hot summer's day, I added a double, I added ice, and I added coconut water. And that really complements the taste of the whiskey. Coconut's also like a key tasting note, right? So it brings out the flavors of the whiskey. In Japan, they mix green tea with their whiskey and honey. It actually goes down pretty well. But literally from 9 o'clock till 5 o'clock, we had to taste 40 whiskeys. We had a notepad next to us, and we had to write all the flavor profiles that we get, right? So by the 12th whiskey, I was already drunk. I already got too excited, but for the life of me, I couldn't taste anything. For me, I was just tasting whiskey and alcohol, right? So after lunch, because everyone was a bit tipsy, so like, you know, you guys were sober, go eat, come back. So after we came back, I'm busy sitting there, I'm busy hearing the examiner saying creme brulee and chocolates. I'm like, you guys are bullshit, that's nonsense. All I get is alcohol. What are they saying, right? So, but for the life of me, I couldn't get any flavors for myself. So I was like, yo, I'm probably gonna get fired by the time I get back to South Africa because I don't know how to taste and smell whiskey, right? So what I did when I actually came back to South Africa, I was like, no man, I have to practice. So what I actually did is I poured a Glenlivet 15-year-old, I poured about 15 mils into my glass, tulip glass. I emptied it out, I left it in my car. I left it in my car for about 2 hours. The whole car smelled like whiskey, right? So then after 2 hours, I got into my car, drove around for about 20 minutes, and after 20 minutes I could start getting those flavors that they mentioned, right? So it took me time to like focus, and actually would be like, okay, they always mention like an almond nuttiness to the Glenlivet 15-year-old, that cinnamon spice, that apricot, those dried fruits, and I was like, okay, actually now I can get it, right? So don't feel intimidated, like it actually takes some time for you actually to sit there and actually practice and actually try to see if you can get flavors for yourself. Because remember, I can stand here and I can say, you should be getting creme brulee, but if you haven't eaten creme brulee in your life, you won't get that, right? So that's why I always ask you guys for your tasting notes, because everyone have their own type of tasting profiles. I remember one guy said it reminds him of his grandmother's feko. So it brings back good memories like that, you know, so everyone's different. All right, so let's go on to take a sip of the Glenlivet 15-year-old, and I want you guys to tell me what flavors come to mind on the palate. What flavors? You feel like it's much more spicy than the previous one, but it's got like that very special finish to it, right? It's not so much. So some people feel that the older the whiskey gets, the more smoother it becomes, right? But some people are completely different, so they feel like the more older it gets, the more harsher it becomes. So everyone's completely different, so there's no clear science on, oh yeah, this whiskey is always going to be smooth, because not everyone will perceive the whiskey as smooth, right? Guys, I've got a question for you. So do you guys know the difference between Irish whiskey and Scotch whiskey? So Irish whiskey, you always hear Jameson saying, triple distilled, twice as smooth, right? So in Irish whiskey, they triple distill their whiskey, whereas in Scotland, we double distill. So I always say the Scots get it right the second time, the Irish need a third time to get it right. But it's all just banter. I mean, I have nothing against Irish whiskey, but literally Irish whiskey you'll find it's much more smoother, right? Because the more you distill your whiskey, the more smoother it becomes, right? But the more you distill it, you also lose a bit of character. So in Scotch whiskey, we retain a lot of character because we double distill. So there's much more flavor in the Scotch whiskey. But it's not to say that the Irish whiskey is bad and Scotch whiskey is good, or vice versa, right? They're both completely different in taste. So you're going for a very smooth whiskey, going for Irish whiskey, more characterful, more bold whiskey, going for Scotch whiskey. Yeah. Good question. So I'm going to get to that now. That's a very good question. So the gentleman asked, what is blended whiskey, right? So within Scotland, you have 5 different types of Scotch whiskies. So your first whiskey that you get is single malt. Then you get single grain, you have blended grain, you have blended malt, and then you have blended Scotch whiskey. So your single malt, I always use my thumb to indicate single malt, because single malt is very bold, very strong in flavor, right? I always use my pinky to indicate single grain, because single grain is very light, right? Very smooth in flavor. And a blended malt is literally a blend of different malts put together. Blended grains are different blends of grain put together. So what a blended Scotch whiskey is literally a combination of blended malt and blended grain put together, you get a blended Scotch whiskey. A blended Scotch whiskey is like your Chivas Regal and your Ballantines, right? That's a blended Scotch whiskey. Single malt is actually your Glenlivet, your Aberlour whiskey. Single grain whiskey, I can give an example of a competitor's is Baines. That's a single grain, right? It's very light, it's very flexible. When it comes to single malt, the easiest way to differentiate a blend compared to a single malt is when it comes to blended whiskey, blend whiskey is like a blend of different whiskeys from different distilleries that you blend it together, right? Single malt, the whiskey is from one distillery. When it comes to blends, the blends are from different distilleries. So think about Nelspruit, Delstrom, Ermelone, there's all distilleries in all these places. And they literally bring liquid from all these distilleries and come back and be blended together. That's a blended Scotch whiskey, right? So blends were created back in the day, like in the late 1800s, because a lot of people felt that single malts were too strong, very bold in flavor. So people wanted more palatable whiskey, right? And then there's guys like James and John Shivers who created Shivers Regal whiskey, who are actually grocers, right? They used to sell like your daily essentials, like your spices, and they're also tea blenders. So they saw a gap in the market for something a bit more different in the whiskey taste. So they were experienced tea blenders. So they had the idea to actually start blending their own whiskeys. So they started blending single malts together and grain whiskies, and then they came up with Shivers Regal, right? So a lot of the blended whiskies actually came up like that, just blending different whiskies together and creating a different taste. And everyone always asks me, so, oh, what's better between a single malt and a blended whiskey? Completely different taste profiles, right? So you're getting a more richer flavor profile from a single malt, and you're getting a completely different taste profile in a blended whiskey. It all depends on your personal palate, what you prefer. Me personally, when it comes to blended Scotch whiskies, I really like Valentine's, right? So everyone looks at a Valentine's Finest, it's like, it's under 200 rand. It's a cheap whiskey, right? It's the second biggest blended Scotch whiskey in the world, right? So everyone looks at price and like, oh, that's how they measure quality, right? But it's not about that. You actually should go out and taste the whiskey. When it comes to a Valentine's Finest, there's over 40 different single malts that go into a Valentine's Finest. So you're getting a very good quality product. But in South Africa, we don't realize what quality we're getting when it comes to a Valentine's, right? So it's just something to think about. You always have those people that are like, I stick to this whiskey and I never drink anything else. Always encourage people to try different things because you'll never know what you like, right? Always experiment with single malts, experiment with blended whiskeys, and see for yourself. All right. So let's go on to actually add a bit of water to our Glenlivet 15-year-old. So remember what we're doing. We're actually opening up our whiskey when we actually add water. So now that you guys have added a bit of water to your Glenlivet 15-year-old, once again go on to nose it, go on to taste it, and you'll feel like the flavors have become much more pronounced, much more out there. Do you guys know when it comes to whiskey, a lot of people don't realize that you can actually pair whiskey with your food. So everyone always thinks that wine is the only thing that you pair with food, right? But whiskey, especially when it comes to single malts, is the perfect whiskey to actually pair with your food, right? So when it comes to a Founder's Reserve, it's very light, very fruity, so it's actually the perfect whiskey to pair with your light fish dishes, like your salmon or your trout or your egg. It really pairs well with fish. And when it comes to a 15-year-old, it's very much more of a spicy flavor, so it pairs very well with like your red meats, your steaks, your venison, your brine meat. It really goes well with that. When it comes to your 18-year-old, which we're about to taste just now, it's much more sweeter, so it pairs very well with the dessert. So I urge you guys, next time you guys are at a restaurant or something, like try and experiment with tasting your whiskey with your meal. It really complements the flavors of your meal. So it's something to try out. Alright. So how do you guys feel the Glenlivet 15-year-old? Alright. You guys feel complete differences between the first whiskey and the second whiskey, right? It completely changes. We're going from a very light, very fruity type of whiskey to a more spicy type of mouthfeel. Alright, so let's move on to the last whiskey, which is the furthest to your right, which is the big boy. Everyone's been waiting for the Glenlivet 18-year-old. So I always like to start off with the Glenlivet 18-year-old by mentioning the obvious, right? The Glenlivet 18-year-old has been matured for 18 years. What were you guys doing 18 years ago? Right? Some of you are still drinking alcohol. But it gives you a whole new appreciation for this whiskey, right? And how long it actually takes for it to be able to be in front of you for you to be able to enjoy it, right? So with the Glenlivet 18-year-old, it's one of the most awarded out of the whole Glenlivet range, right? So the Glenlivet 18-year-old, we matured it in ex-bourbon American oak, and then we finished it off an ex-sherry wine cask from Spain. So if you're a sherry wine lover, you'll actually really enjoy the Glenlivet 18-year-old. So it's like got that sherry wine influence combined with the fruitiness from the American oak. It really makes a very well-balanced whiskey. So go on to nose the whiskey and you'll feel the smells are much more richer, right? Very rich, those cherries, those toffees. So for me, it always reminds me of my childhood, right? So when I was younger, my mother used to buy those giant toffee apples for my brother and I. So it really brings back that vivid memories of like toffee apple, right? You guys get spice. You get like very rich, right? Exactly. So for me, it's one of the very few whiskies that actually enjoy neat. Right? So I feel it's very smooth. So some people find it harsh, but I feel it very smooth. And if you go on to actually take a sip of it, you'll feel it's like very velvety on your mouth, right? Like silky on the mouth when you drink it. So when it comes to this whiskey, remember it's also 43%. All these whiskeys at 43% ABV. And interestingly enough, in South Africa, we're one of the very few countries that bottle our whiskey at 43%. Everywhere else in the world, they bottle their whiskey at 40%. So literally in South Africa, we get an extra 3%. And I always say that 3% for all the bullshit that we deal with in the country. So we get an extra 3%. But the main reason why we're at 43% and the rest of the world's at 40% is that it goes back to apartheid. So during apartheid, to protect the local brandy, the apartheid government said that all Scotch whiskey and Irish whiskey coming into South Africa have to be at 43% and have to be in 750 ml bottles. Everywhere else in the world, they bottle their whiskey at 700 ml bottles. So literally in South Africa, we're getting an extra 50 ml and we're getting extra 3% alcohol, which is pretty good for us. Right, so we're not complaining. Yes. If you keep it open, so if you take off the lid, you mean, and just leave it there, obviously, yeah, it's going to evaporate. So alcohol will evaporate. That's why you need to put the cork back on, right? And it's all about how you store your whiskey. So your whiskey will never expire as long as you keep it stored properly. So some people, if you store it like this, after a while, the alcohol is going to eat into the cork, and the cork will break and it'll go into your whiskey and ruin your whole whiskey. So you always keep your whiskey stored upright, and always keep it in a cool, dark area, right? But as soon as you open your whiskey, if you keep your whiskey for 10 years, there will be a bit of evaporation that takes place, so your whiskey will go a bit lower after some time, all right? You guys know why all the whiskeys are more expensive. So everyone always asks me like, oh Marco, why are all the whiskeys more expensive, right? And I always like to give them the example. So when you first have your whiskey, right, so you put it up to your oak costs, right? So it's a full oak cost in the first year, right? Every year after that you use on average 2% due to evaporation. We call that the angel's share. So I believe it goes up to the angels, right? So imagine every 2 years you're losing 2% of the actual whiskey. So if I give you guys the example of the Glenlivet 50-year-old, Glenlivet 50-year-old's worth 650,000 rand, right? That's like a Golf GTI basically, right? So 650k for one bottle. Right? So now I'll give you this example. In the beginning, it starts off at a full cost. At the end of 50 years, you're left with less than a quarter of the liquid left in the whole cost. So imagine it's so valuable because literally you're left with such a small amount after 50 years. That's why that liquid is so valuable. Remember, the master distiller that put the cask there to mature is dead and gone. So someone else has to take care of it. And we also don't just leave the oak cask there, let it sleep for 50 years and come back. Like, it's constantly monitoring the oak cask, constantly monitoring the liquid to make sure it's fine. That's why your Glenlivet 50-year-olds are worth 650k and your older whiskies are worth more because of the evaporation that takes place. Any questions on that? Yeah, so that's why your older whiskies are more expensive, right? Even when it comes to your Glenlivet 12-year-old, people look at the 12-year-olds like, ah, it's nothing, it's young, right? But it takes 12 years for it to be mature, right? And also people ask me like, oh, Marco, is that really 12 years? Like, come on, what is it? Right? And I always like to remind people, when it comes to whiskey in Scotland, it's their biggest export. They can't afford to mess it up, right? And within Scotland, there's a Scotch Whisky Society, which is like a regulatory body, like a police almost, that actually monitors each and every single distillery to make sure when they say it's a 12-year-old, when they say it's a 15-year-old, it's definitely a 12-year-old, it's definitely a 15-year-old. And they also make sure that we don't put any weird artificial flavors in our whiskey. Alright? So when it comes to single malts, there's only 3 ingredients that go into a single malt Scotch whiskey. It's barley, yeast, and water. Those are the only 3 ingredients that go into a single malt Scotch whiskey. Imagine, right? It's quite amazing to think. So yeah. But other than that, I urge you guys, for those of you that want to, please add some water to your Glenlivet 18-year-old. Open up your whiskey, you'll get much more flavors out of it. So what does everyone think about the Glenlivet 18-year-old so far? Right, so do you guys feel like it's much more flavorful, much more bold in character? What's everyone's favorite so far? So let's see by show of hands. Whose favorite was the first whiskey, the Founder's Reserve? The Founder's Reserve. Whose favorite was the Founder's Reserve? Alright. Whose favorite was the Glenlivet 15-year-old? Alright. Whose favorite was the 18-year-old? Alright. It's like a mix of a menu, so that's pretty good. So you see, everyone has different taste profiles. It's either you like a very sweet, very fruity type of alcohol, you're going for a spicier whiskey over here, and you're going for a much more sweeter version of the 18-year-old. Alright. So ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of our tasting. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to grab me and you can read about whiskey. But for now, let's propose a toast. Propose a toast, so grab your favorite glass. We propose a toast to health, wealth, good whiskey, and in Scotland we don't say cheers, we say slanjava. Not slanjava, slanjava. Thank you guys have been great. Guys, we're about to do a raffle, so all of you guys, your guys' name has gone into a bowl over here, and you guys stand a chance of winning an amazing bottle of Glenlivet Founders Reserve. So I'm going to do the draw right now. So everyone's not sure. We'll roll over, exactly. I think you rigged this. So Mr. Rio. I think we have to change it. We have to move it on to someone else. Alright, so actually we're going to do another draw for another bottle because that wasn't wrong. So you will get a bottle, but I'll be donating another bottle to the next another one. There you got good luck, huh? 18 Alright, so the second winner is Mr. Ntlantla Temba. So well done, I'll be giving you guys bottles just now. Alright, for the rest of our guests here at Newscafe, we're going to be treating you guys to a shot of Glenlivet 12-year-old. So waiters will be bringing you guys a glass of Glenlivet 12-year-old in the next 10 minutes or so. So I hope you guys enjoy your nights, and yeah, cheers, thank you for having us. Thank you.